My name is Jonathan Chase. I am a native Oregonian, a lifelong Trailblazers fan, and 2 weeks shy of my 29th birthday. Growing up, I had a lot of labels, but autism wasn't one of them. I was the troublemaker, the weird kid, the loner. I wasn't like the other kids, though nobody really knew why, only that I was different. I couldn't seem to make friends, to relate to the other kids in school, and if I tried to fit in, I usually got it wrong. Being small, different, and smart made me a target for bullies. It started early in grade school with taunts and shoving, but by the 5th grade it had progressed from general bullying to serious physical abuse. The other kids would bind my hands and beat me. They would take me to the hill at the edge of the playground, drag me to the top, grab my arms and legs, and throw me down the embankment. The playground aide once told me I needed to figure out what you're doing that makes those other boys want to hit you. My principal brought me into his office and gave me a baseball mitt as a gift if I would keep things between us and not tell my parents what was going on. When I did report the abuse to my parents, the teachers told them I was making up stories. I bounced from one school to another, always running into bullies, never fitting in, and always feeling like I couldn't quite relate to the other kids around me. By the time I started high school, I had little faith or trust in my teachers or the other kids. Still, I was determined. I accepted that I was different, though I still didn't know why, and I vowed that I would succeed in school no matter how abusive my peers were. One day, I was called into the principal's office, which was not unusual, but both my parents were there, which could only mean one thing: I was in big trouble. But they sat me down and they said, "You're autistic. You have Aspergers syndrome." They said that now they understood me, and they were here to help. And I couldn't believe it. After all these years of feeling alone, these strangers came out of nowhere and said they want to help me now, at 14 years old when I'm practically a grown man. Now, what they said fit me very well, but I didn't trust them, and I was uninterested in being labeled by strangers. At the time when I was losing the last of my faith in the school system or my peers, an event happened that would change my life. My parents bought me a bass guitar, the worst bass guitar ever built, a powder blue 1966 Kalamazoo bass. But I practiced all day, every day. I missed classes. Sometimes I didn't go to school at all. At 15 years old, I was working in my first band, playing bars around town. And when I turned 16, a local blues band asked me to fill in, even though I only knew one blues song and that band didn't play it. But I played a 5-hour gig with those guys, all of whom were as old as my parents. And at the end of the night, the band leader came up to me, shook my hand, put a $100 bill in it, and said, "Good job, kid. I'll see you at the next gig in a week." And I looked at the money, I looked at him, I looked back at the money, and a light bulb went on. Oh my God, they'll pay you money to do this. I got my GED, and I never went back to school. At 16, I was working in bands at night, and I was practicing all day. At 18, I took my first trip to Nashville to study with some of the greatest musicians in the world, including bassist Victor Wooten of Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. I play mostly in Portland, but I've toured with different bands and gone up and down the West Coast. The music business is a strange place for someone with autism. There are no excuses, no explanations, and one of the greatest skills a working musician can have is the ability to look another man in the eye, shake his hand, and judge whether or not he'll really pay you at the end of the night. That's not really the traditional strength for someone like me. Autism is not as simple as being bad at making friends or being uncomfortable with some sensations like getting your hands wet or wearing a tight tie. An autistic brain is wired differently than everyone else. Wires get crossed, and everything that comes in is filtered a bit differently. You may be able to listen to me speak and tune out the light at the back of the room, or the hum of the air conditioner, or the way that your sock is bunched up just a little bit on your right foot. But all those things can be equally distracting to someone like me. My brain can't always tell what's important and what isn't. I might get so excited talking about my favorite band that I completely miss my date rolling her eyes and glancing at her watch. My focus is on our conversation, not her body language. Autism is a spectrum, ranging from people who appear completely normal and functional to those who cannot communicate at all. But there are some things all of us on the spectrum have in common. We all perceive the world differently than most people do, and we all have strengths and weaknesses, just like anyone else. Some of us can speak, and some cannot. Some have great talents, and others struggle with daily tasks that most people take for granted. Sometimes we become so overwhelmed by the world around us that we shut down entirely, unable to process what's coming in anymore, like a computer stuck in an unending loop. Recovering from that can take a minute or a week. When I was diagnosed with autism, that label came with a ceiling. They told me all the things I would never do. The day before that meeting, the world was my oyster, and I could be or do anything I wanted. The day after, there was a list of things I could never accomplish. They told me I would never work with my hands. They said my fine motor skills were poor, and I could never work in a field that required manual dexterity. There was an expectation that I would never drive a car. Most people with autism have an expectation put on them that they will never live independently, have normal relationships, or a career. In fact, they tell us that those doors are closed to us, so why even try? 2 years after my diagnosis, I was working as a professional musician, and playing the bass does require the use of your fingers. I believed that I would never be able to drive a car, but I worked hard, and I got my driver's license at the age of 27. Now, I'm working as hard as I can to build my career and move away from my family to achieve complete independence later this year. I am not special or different from other people with autism. The biggest difference is that when people tell me no, I don't listen. I refuse to believe that anyone but me can decide whether or not I will be successful, and I believe that's true of everyone, not just people with a disability or those of us who are wired a bit differently. We are not only battling the challenges of autism, but an expectation to fail. Every person who is diagnosed has a ceiling placed over their heads. They are told, you will never achieve anything above here. In fact, don't even bother to try. As if there are not enough challenges already, many people with autism are fighting an inner battle as well, not just against the things that are hard for them, but against the things they are expected to fail at. Yet every day, I hear stories of people, from children to adults, who are pushing themselves and achieving things nobody thought possible. It doesn't have to be a great success from the outside. They don't hand out medals for going to the grocery store, or trying a new food, or shaking someone's hand for the first time. But all those things can be great challenges and great triumphs for someone with autism. We have all been told that there are many things we'll never do, and heard lists of goals we will never reach. But the words don't make it true. With support, encouragement, and belief, even the most heavily impacted people can make great strides and achieve things no one believed possible. There are many hurdles, but few walls. When I was a kid, nobody could have imagined that I would stand in front of a crowd and speak. I have been on the board of directors for the Autism Society of Oregon for over 3 years, and now one of my fellow board members is the same woman who diagnosed me with autism 14 years ago. A lot can change with time, effort, and determination. When you leave here tonight, I ask you to change your expectations just a little. Don't think of Rain Man, or idiot savants, or children who cannot speak and are completely detached from reality. Instead, think of your most challenging moments. Think of the time you had to take an important phone call in a crowded, noisy room. The time you had to go to a business meeting, but the only jacket you had was one size too small. The time you had to go and speak with your boss, but all you could think about was your sick spouse or child, and the way those thoughts kept distracting you and pulling you away from the conversation. Those are the challenges that people with autism face every single day. They are not impossible to overcome, but they are not small challenges either. Everyone in this room has something that would fall on the autism checklist. Over here, there's someone who doesn't like the texture of fish. Over here, she has always been sensitive to loud noises. In the back, there's someone who can't stand the feel of a turtleneck sweater. And over there, there's someone who always has trouble telling whether his friends are being sarcastic. We all have our own challenges and little parts of ourselves that we need to work on. There is no excuse for the next generation of autistic people to fail. There is no excuse not to support those who are out there right now, from children to adults. We have tools and supports now that didn't exist 20 years ago, and ways to help people unlike any other time in history. There is no reason not to believe that every person with autism can achieve a level of greatness and find their own personal triumphs. But we also need help. You can help us offer those tools and supports to the ones who need it most. We can change lives and allow people to work towards goals no one has ever believed they could achieve. You can make a difference in the lives of every person with autism who comes after us. Thank you.